stream the meeting. The scary ideas.
That's it. I'll have to watch my language. I know that's been live streamed.
Yeah. Let me get you a share to the live stream just so you can see it. Yeah, I need to try and prevent echo, otherwise it will drive me mad.
I'm not getting that so far, but I haven't opened the second stream yet.
All right. Well, we can see how it works. I'm not advertising there's a link out there, right? Just so we can play with it without us feeling that we're all in a world of attention that we don't want to be in yet. All right, so we're just experimenting with live streaming on YouTube, but as I say, I'm not advertising.
Hello. Yeah,
hey, everybody.
I was a little bit nervous. Like, what? I'm being live streamed?
Yeah.
Zoom warned me.
All right. If we're going to live stream the meeting, what I suggest we do is, you can all chat amongst yourselves and say hello to each other. But as we do the
Hi, Dominic.
thing we did previously, which is run issues and stuff. Oh yeah, so I should introduce Dom. Dom, that's Paul and Toby. I used to work with Toby at Huddle, along with Rob Prince, Gordon So, Isabel, some of the other people you know. This is Dom, who works with me at Just Eat Takeaway. Paul works with an ex-colleague of mine from Huddle, Ian, another Ian. But Paul has been contributing for, I don't know, it feels like a year. It's probably about 2 or 3, isn't it, Paul, in reality?
I actually looked the other day and was shocked to find out it's 3 or just gone 3.
Wow.
God,
yeah. Okay.
We've been working on this 11 years, I think, now, Coops.
We have, yeah. So it's 11 years. So it's interesting because it came up. I posted about it the other day because people, you know, occasionally go, well, why did you write Brighter when there's already Mediator? And it's like, no, we came first. Jimmy took Brighter and said, oh, I like it, but I don't want to have the messaging stuff because I use N Service Bus. So he basically made Mediator from it. And then people go, well, why did you do it when you already had Mass Transit? And it's kind of like, Mass Transit was a broker. Wasn't a messaging framework. So both N Service Bus and Mass Transit started as brokers for MSMQ. And we were probably about the first messaging framework in .NET space. And apart from probably his name is EasyMQ, which is
EasyMQ and
what's
Mike Hadler.
Name Mike Hadler, wrote. So he probably predates us a little bit. So they then followed us and became messaging frameworks when people started wanting to use Rabbit and everything else. So we've been doing it probably longer than Mass Transit has as a general framework. All right, let me share my ability to share. I'll share the page so we can run through the issues, but the controls have changed. Why has the controls changed soon?
I see Zoom has jumped on the AI bandwagon.
Oh yeah, I think I've tried that before. Something else I tried doing the whole hey, can we see the transcript? And it kind of works okay. All right. Why Zoom doesn't want me to share in this mode, I don't know, which is interesting. It's not. It's given me a different set of controls, and I can't find how do I share my screen, which is an interesting. No, that's because it's live streaming. Stop share. All right, I found an old school menu control for it. All right. So what we want to do is have a look at the issues, look at any new ones, say, hey, have a quick look at bugs and priorities and things like that, and generally figure out what is happening. Then we'll have a look at PRs, and then we'll do AOB. All right. So looking at issues, there's a new one come in today, which is page dispatch command fails. So Roman is using V10 preview, which is great. And he's definitely finding a few things that we've broken in V10. So that's another one for us to look at, which is around the archiver. He will not be working on the one that effectively Paul has got fixed. So I guess we need to get a release out shortly to help fix him. I am currently looking at the PRs, working on something I'd like to get a little bit further on before we do a new release, just because it's going to naturally have a few bug fixes. But we should probably just make that one a bug. Do you think you fixed this one, Paul, or do you think this is a separate one to the one you just fixed?
Yeah,
Oh,
muted, Paul.
Not getting anything.
Is this a schema migration issue, maybe? That he needs to migrate his schema to being the current schema? It's page dispatched. Is Paul speaking?
He's trying to. We can't hear him.
Everybody else.
I can lip read I am in response to is Paul talking.
Okay. We're struggling to hear you, my friend. I don't see that you're
How
muted.
about this?
Yeah.
You've got to love audio issues. So I'm using a much worse microphone. I don't believe this will actually fix.
Okay.
So what I did
Oh,
was
yeah.
fix it.
Yeah, it looks like a schema issue. So it could just be that because we've changed the schema with this version, he might be trying to use an old version of the schema. Let's make a quick note and say possibly a schema issue.
Did we change the version of the schema? Am I seeing?
Version 10, it has a slightly different schema, I think, than V9.
Okay. I believe that then.
So one of our outstanding items for V10 go live would be, do we want to give you a way of migrating your schema from V9 to V10? Just give you some DDL that helps you do that, or do we expect you to do it yourself? That's an open question I think we still have. All right. I think that's the only one that's not got any labels on it. So I assume that's the only one that basically we haven't looked at. Okay. So maybe a quick look at just what all the bugs we've currently got. There's quite a few. So maybe we need to have a little bit of a war on bugs. Port connections in use. Paul, is that the one?
That's the one I should have fixed now, yes.
Okay. All right. So let's move that to done. It's just not released yet.
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't been following this one, I've been, so what I've done is I've commented the logic between getting and closing a connection or getting and finalizing a connection with write. There was a bit of refactoring that went into V10 that looked like we weren't closing connections uniformly. So now everything's been moved into the abstraction. So if we have an issue, it'll be on all of our relational DB outboxes or none of them. I'm hoping for none.
Yeah, overall, Paul and I were chatting and saying, as much as possible, we should try and make sure that we have functionality in the base relational database class, not in the derived ones for each database type, because otherwise we tend to occasionally get this kind of like we fix it in one, and we forget one of the others, and then we don't necessarily remember to test whatever it is other one, and it sneaks out again. So we should try and make sure we fix it in the base. Okay. Has action open transaction property always returns false? That's again a V10 issue, I think.
I haven't looked at that one yet, if I'm being honest. I've got a few.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that one.
Get it out first.
All right. So it's still in our backlog. We do need to get to it. Let's just keep an eye on all of them when we try and push our way through the bugs. Paged outstanding command query in MS SQL subtracts seconds instead of milliseconds, causing out what we sweep. I think. All right. I think we may have looked at that one, but we need to check. I will. So it is assigned to me. I need to check at some point soon to basically fix that. Again, that's V10. So probably we should try and get a few of these fixed before we get the next V10 preview out. But there was a strange thing going on here overall, that we had some inconsistency when we were looking at our outboxes in terms of the scale of the parameter we were passing. In some cases, it was saying hours, in some case seconds, some case milliseconds. I think we should be consistent and just have milliseconds as our time scale for nearly anything we do. I can't think of any real reasons why we'd ever need to actually set anything in seconds or hours. So it may be just be worth reviewing some of those APIs to make sure we haven't done anything where there's that confusion has crept in for V10.
Is there a reason why we just don't use a time span rather than passing an integer value?
It's a good question. I think historically, probably we didn't. Time span didn't exist. We could look to change that in V10 and say, okay, let's replace all of our ints with time spans.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
It didn't exist actually, because we started a very long time ago, and we just stuck with it.
I've noticed that in, I can't remember what other library I was using, but there was a major version change where they changed from seconds or milliseconds over to time span, and it made things a lot easier.
Yeah, no, it's good call.
I guess it's mainly milliseconds. I will. One of us again.
I'm just D Hickey. That's why I'm not showing. There we go.
There we go. All right. As I'm saying, V10 just in case people. All right. So good discussion. So this one down. Requeue error with deferred message accent under messaging gateway MS SQL. All right. Tommy, you haven't been in this conversation. I don't think. We have a historical guy called Fred Hugen, who still see on Twitter occasionally. Contribution of a SQL-based transport, or MS SQL-based transport in particular. So we had open questions about, do we need to support this? There was a working theory Toby raised that he's seen folks use it a lot, where effectively they're dealing with something like end service bus with a Zero service bus or whatever, and they want to work locally, and they're swapping it out for MS SQL locally. And we were like, well, we just probably suggest you use Rabbit over MS SQL if you need a local swap in replacement transport to do some local testing, and you haven't got a kind of local version of your service bus to use.
Yeah. So it's my previous company, they're all doing that. So when I arrived, they had like the switch thing that says if it's local, use use the in-service bus SQL connection. So when they came to Brighter, they went, "Oh, we just use the kind of." It seems to be a pattern from also because we had a bunch of in-service people that came from other people that we also hired, and they all seem to use the same pattern. Like they also use it because then it's cheaper as well when they do it in their like QA environments. They use the SQL
Yeah.
version and only use the real bus when they go live, which is.
I mean, in theory as well, you ought to be able to talk to RabbitRM QP10 with the plugin. But we asked, and they use MSL, MS SQL as their primary message broker. So we probably need to fix this bug.
Well, yeah, because it's not the purpose.
Yeah. And I guess we need to kind of review, right? I mean, people do use Postgres, I know, because once you get skip log, right, you can build a queue much more easily. So again, one of us needs to tackle it. It may have to be me after I get a little bit further on the hotel stuff and put that in a better place, which is annoying, right? Hosting throws an invalid cast exception with DynamoDB outbox. I don't know, Dom, is one you've seen? We could always assign this to you because I've got a lot on my list at the minute.
Yeah, I saw it. It's not an issue I've seen because I think he said in here that it's fine if you're using the transaction provider. Is that what he said? But if you don't use the transactional provider, that's when it falls over.
Yeah, he's saying it also affects MySQL outbox. All right.
Yeah, so when you use the DynamoDB transaction provider, it's okay, which is what I've been doing so far.
Yeah, rather than the DynamoDB unit of work, whatever, directly. So he is pulling in the I'm a transaction provider. Oh, right. Okay, I see what's going on. So basically, because of generics, we needed to understand what to do with some of these methods that take a request and a transaction type if you were not effectively asking us to give you a transaction provider. And in some of those cases, what we did was effectively we just opt for committable transaction because it's the in-memory transaction. And our assumption was in most cases, it's just people doing this are doing it because they're working in memory rather than working with an actual transaction provider. The problem he's got here is that he's not set it up with something that's going to give him the actual transaction provider when he's got a casting error. All right, I will take that one because I suspect it might just be we don't let you do that. Because it doesn't make sense, but I will see quite what basically happens if I fix that. All right, let me see if I can recreate it. What he's talking about. All right. Error when a number of partition changed in a cooperative rebalance protocol. Actually, we should probably say that's a V10 machine. Fix. It's working on the V10 version. We changed all that stuff. All right. And that one is V10 or V9. V9. All right. Just making note of that. So
I don't know if it's just 4 of us, but there are 4 people watching our stream.
Wow. I'm watching.
I'm watching. So that's 2.
I know 2 of them from my work are watching as well.
Wow.
It's creepy.
An audience already. Okay. All right. So we need to probably fix that V9 one. It's more of a priority than the others because they're all on a preview release. The issue with where are we? Let's go back to that. Okay. This partition one. We'll fix later, I think. So we support round robin. We don't support sticky cooperative. Why is that? Well, because what happens is under round robin, what Kafka will do when effectively it wants to change where the partitions live, because you've increased or reduced the number of consumers that you have, or you've potentially changed the number of partitions. Under round robin, it says to everybody, okay, you no longer have that partition, please commit the outstanding work. And you therefore then have no partition, so you're not committing any work. And then it says, okay, here's a new allocation of partitions. The problem with that, of course, is you may get reallocated to partition you're already using, so there's a bit of inefficiency. So what Cooperative Sticky does is says, well, if you already have the partition, it isn't kind of removed from you. The only problem is you can't commit while effectively that repartition is in progress, even under Cooperative Sticky. So the problem is Cooperative Sticky breaks if what happens is you try and commit before the Cooperative Sticky rebalance is complete. In other words, you're in the middle of it. There's no way of telling that, right? You can't tell you are on a Cooperative Sticky rebalance, apart from you have to literally kind of make an API call whenever you want to commit and say, am I in a Cooperative Sticky rebalance? If not, I should not do this, which is effectively what the Java one does. Now that the only flip side of that for me is that means so every commit you make, you've got to make an API call to basically say, okay, am I in a Cooperative Sticky rebalance? Which would seem to me to probably counteract the value of, hey, I don't have to do this rebalance. I'm not going to lose and regain my partition. So I'm a little bit like, I'm going to park it for a bit. Also because the Java client has its own built, code for this. The librd one, which everyone else uses who isn't Java, that ability to check the API is not built in. It's quite possible Confluent will fix that, and they will say, okay, we will determine whether or not you're in a Cooperative Sticky rebalance, and effectively tell you we can't make that commit right now. It's because it works, and because Cooperative Sticky is a bit at the minute I'm parked it. There's a slightly annoying complaint on here saying everybody else supports Cooperative Sticky, why don't you? And I'm like, that's fine, they do. But there you go. But we'll get to it at some point. But it's not a high priority. So I'm going to take it off up next, I think, and put it into backlog because I think we've got more important bugs to kind of fix, and probably really, seeing as this is in V9, that ought to be our main up next. All right. That's hopefully getting into. There's another one, problems encountered an MS SQL messaging gateway. I suspect that is a only receives one notifier. So this is just an overall, we didn't really think you were using this. We should have a look at that and try and fix what's wrong with that one. This one is pretty old. And I don't know whether it's necessarily genuinely a bug. They have an issue that they want to essentially ignore messages that basically are incorrect. Whereas we tend to say, okay, after a certain number of incorrect messages, we're going to shut Brighter down because we assume that there has been a configuration error. We've probably got the wrong messages in our queue, or reading the wrong queue, or whatever. They want to be able to say, actually, if I see a message I can't understand, never stop, sort of thing. So I just need to check on that at some point. But I think it's probably a V10 issue because behavior is as expected. You just want to do something a little weird, which is kind of ignore errors, basically. Auto restart performers. I don't know, that's been in there for a long time, and I don't know whether or not that is, whether we just kill this bug at the minute and then come back to it. So this is basically, we effectively have a service supervisor worker model within Service Activator. So we have a supervisor thread, it dispatches a whole lot of worker threads. If you live in a land where we are your only supervisor and set of workers, it may make sense for us to handle restarts. What I worry is about feature creep away from a model which says probably in the modern world, most of you will tend to do this by using Kubernetes to actually have to do this, and you probably shouldn't be relying on our supervisor worker model to build out a full-on supervisor worker. But there's a note from Toby and there's a note from Still Fixed. So conceivably prevention, yeah. So kill the infra. I don't know whether, if anyone wants to look at this again, feel free. Paul's currently assigned, but I guess it's probably.
This is something I wanted to look at with the whole distributed control work.
Yeah.
So with the Brighter Control API, which is still, I'm not going to say it's flaky, it works. There are a few extra things that could make it better. That was obviously the individual node control, but then I want to actually move it to a more distributed orchestrated model, which would then allow you to fix this.
Yeah.
So the way I saw it is in a much further in the future version, the orchestrator would maintain a number of running performers over your farm.
So for Dom, we may not be aware, we do have an API, control API. So at one point, we have also something called the control bus, which is a bit different. A control API, which essentially works alongside some health check stuff we've got as well, but can do things like increase or decrease the number of performers you're running via an API call. And so Paul's been kind of trying to take that forward and see what kind of support we might want to give you for externally controlling without necessarily a restart of the individual container, pod, executable, whatever you're running. Be able to effectively adjust the performance.
I found it very useful for times when you either want to scale up a performer, or I've even had times where I want to stop a batch process. I can just scale the performer down to 0. Obviously, on any service restart, that goes away and goes back to whatever you've defaulted it to. But it's been quite useful here for quite a few different situations.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll put it in the V10 list, but maybe we take it out of bug, right? And we'll make it into, we'll say it's probably really a feature request for V10. Because it's been such a long time, I think it's difficult to say it's a bug. It's probably more a feature request, and then we don't have to keep looking at a bug list, which would, I think, help.
I agree, because that only ends up off for specific reasons, like you set it to turn off after a certain number of failures. So if you set that to 0, you never get to turn off, and then it's generally just a configuration issue that will kill it.
Yeah. So I think a couple of these, which I think also this one about, I might move a couple of feet, we'll have to do it now, but the cooperative rebalance protocol, I may actually move into a feature request, because I think it works, right? It tells you can't do it. Right now it says we don't actually support it. It won't let you configure that particular option. It will say to you, we don't support cooperative sticky. And I think it's easy to think about it as being a feature request rather than a bug at this point, that we want to basically include it, but it's not, you are not broken right now. And I think the same is true with message type mismatches. Causes dispatcher to stop, which is, you want a new feature, which is the ability to decide that you want to ignore errors in this area. But I think that we'll treat that as a feature request, I think, rather than this is a bug.
That one ends up going with the other feature requests that we have in there around dispatching from the outbox from the sweeper, where if you have a channel that doesn't exist or issues, it effectively blocks the sweeper from working.
Yeah. Right, that makes the bug list look a bit more reasonable. I think the V9 one is our biggest priority because it is existing software, and then V10 stuff, it is a preview, and it's great that people are using the preview and giving us feedback, and we should probably try and be timely on some of that and get a release out for them. But maybe want to give an idea of our next release window, depending on getting a few more of these fixed, so that we can actually get one out we can have a chat with him and see whether any of them are burning a problem for him. But I feel okay with us working through that because no one should be trying to run production workloads on V10, right? All right, pull requests. We could probably start at the top. Where are we on backport? Customizable AWS SD clients to V9. I believe that we've just got a failing build of is this the horror build of Command Processor Factory for us to talk about? Something
May
else.
well be.
Nope, there's a
Oh, interesting.
build issue. Missing a using directive.
Ooh.
Possibly pops out because
Okay, I think that's
that
something
may
for
well
me
be a
to
merge.
look at.
Yeah, it looks like it's probably a merge issue,
Yeah, I suspect so.
my friend. We probably brought in something else, which is so for example,
rebase.
we will have brought in, looking at that. That has come because when I did the work that makes publish now parallel. So command process publish, which is where effectively you're internally wanting to distribute to more than one handler, so rather not across a message queue. So send and publish are basically the internal ones, like kind of mediator equivalent. So publish and V10, I wanted to make it parallel. So on a send or publish rather, it will basically do parallel for each, and on a publish async, it will do a task when all. The only problem with that is, and interestingly enough, observability kind of popped it out, was because the observability stuff, some of the tests failed, and they failed because we hand the request context to all of our child handlers on a publish, and they effectively then were confused as to basically what the span was they were attaching stuff to, because we kept trying to alter the span on the context from different threads. So I went in and made request context thread safe. And that basically a couple of things. We changed the type of the outbox bag to be a concurrent dictionary. And the span is now controlled by a thread ID. So it's a dictionary of thread ID to span. You don't see the span on the span. You don't see it because it's an implementation detail hidden by a property. So whenever you try and get a set or get the span, it does it by your thread ID. It does mean, of course, that if you look at the request context after the publisher's run, what is your span, right? It doesn't really matter because your span effectively would be for the individual publish anyway. So you just use we reset the parent span anyway at the end of the publish event. So that's fine. It doesn't matter that you may have reset it by individual subthread that we span off. So just a little bit of stuff in there, but that's probably a change in the interface of request context. So that may be what's caused that at a rough guess.
Yeah, I'll have a look at that.
The perils of continuous integration. Add sweep for the web API samples. All right. So in the continuing journey on OTel and cloud events. So we had OTel and cloud events, but obviously we're trying to basically look at semantic conventions, which are quite rich now, and try and up our game a little bit. So one of the next things so we've got basically, we're writing inside the command processor and the external bus services, we're now writing our telemetry. I haven't done it for archive as an operation yet, and we haven't flowed the work in. So it only works on the in-memory transport and outboxes and inboxes. We'll need to go at some point and add them to the external transports and inboxes. That's a little bit later. First of all, what I wanted to do was just get the archive stuff working and get it plugged into the samples so that we could see the actual OTel stuff. We need to use either Zipkin or Jaeger for now, because event stuff is apparently not showing up in Spire at the minute. Won't until probably later in the year. As part of that, I wanted to refactor the samples a bit because I was merging in Paul's Sweeper, which is in a different example, into our main web API examples. We had a discussion before, so we got a lot of samples. And what I wanted to reduce that down to was saying, okay, in the samples, we should have task queue ones, which show us effectively a simple version of working with a given transport. These ones which are internal, so they're in memory effectively. So that's in memory, just send and publish, send and publish, and doing it with the internal bus. For the internal buses, we extended this idea of, rather than having fakes, which we didn't really like, we now have in memory represent versions of most things, so that we can in our tests just use the in memory versions, but you could use them yourself, particularly if you're in a kind of modular monolith scenario. And some simple factories that basically mean if you're not using service collection. So they're all now part of Brighter itself. So you can write your tests without having to use fakes, which is a good thing. There are a couple of uses of fake need to kill still, which are mainly to do with understanding the state of something like a dispatcher or a channel. And I think actually what they're indicating to us is we need to surface that out. But that's slightly an aside. What I wanted to do is effectively, we're going to take away web API working with Sweeper. We're going to move sweepers into, gee, that's not the branch. Why am I not? Yeah. So on something like Dapper, you can see we're going to have a sweeper. We can then show the sweeper against the lock mechanism. All of these samples, the way we want them all to work is that you can configure what transport and database you are working. So if you look here, it'll say to you, okay, what database am I using? What transport am I using? So that you can run the samples with any kind of combination of a kit that we have. And therefore test them out more easily, because we do find every so often that we make changes. The tests don't pick up everything that's wrong when you actually configure the whole thing. So it's quite useful with the web API sample to run that a little bit. So we'll get a sweeper in here. The other thing I wanted to do was that, so because the sweepers had quite a bit of complexity in setup, I wanted to break out all the stuff we currently use to do stuff like make our database, right? So actually, for something like Inbox, it's fairly simple. With one for Dynamo here, one effectively it's saying, okay, go and create the relevant inboxes depending on what database type you've got. We do schema creation in here for, I want to create my test databases for greetings and salutations and all the other stuff in the sample code, right? But also I partly wanted to break it out into this DB maker thing. And I may make a transport maker as well, because I think that may make it easier for us to look at this and go, actually, some of that could be replaced with Aspire. But I thought by breaking it out into a common utility assembly, it would be a little bit easier to see whether or not that was viable. And they were all kind of using bits and pieces of the same thing. So EF Core doesn't use all of it, but it uses some of the thing in here. So I wanted to get that done and then hook up either Zipkin or Jaeger in basically the existing, not moving to Aspire at all on this, but in the existing Docker Compose kind of version. Then I can see the OTel coming out. And when that's done, I'm okay that this is kind of good. I mean, I've already picked up one slight bug, which is, if you haven't configured tracing, there's a couple of places we weren't checking that Brighter Tracer might be null when you try and get that service dependency, and it was falling over because it was saying, oh, I can't trace because there's a null tracer. Cool. We need to just say, hey, don't trace if there's a null tracer, right? So I've fixed some of those in this, but that's what this one is all about, is making those clear. I've also just reduced some complexity and just had an app on web. An app is basically the application bit, if you like, from ports and adapters architecture. It's both the ports and adapters, whereas this is just what calls them. So it's a little bit simpler, but hopefully that'll make our overall samplers easier. And I'm just working on some readmes to explain where everything goes, but also help us. That's not my goal. I don't want to do that as part of this. But if we want to aspirify stuff, having one of these, there's probably a transport maker, may make it easier to see typically what we would want to aspirify. Does that make sense? Once we get this in with archive working, then it's just really a question of rolling out some of that OTel to all the transports and all of the concrete outboxes and inboxes. And what I'll do is write up a little recipe, and then we can just all divide up the work and conquer. That makes sense. Any sort of questions on where we are on this? And there's quite a lot going into this one area. No, all good. All right, just as soon as I can. I've discovered, by the way, just for interest, that if you want to edit structure of things, VS Code is better than Rider. Rider, basically, when you try doing too much restructuring of apps and saying, no, it's now Greetings app, and we're replacing entities and moving into ports and combining the one, and I wouldn't need you to make it struggles. It sprays garbage in places. Whereas if you just go into VS Code and manually edit the CS proj files and manually edit the solution file, it's a lot easier. But roll on slightly more sensible solution files because the current ones are a pig to edit. Yeah. I expect I'll break things for people in terms of merge. So I don't want to try and hang out too long. I may actually just merge when the sample structure is right before we actually do the archive bit and do the OTel bit, and just you may have 2 or 3 merges of it. All right, bump actions checkout from 3 to 4 is just not done because I haven't had time to look at it and test it and see whether that really would work or break anything. Anyone wants to volunteer to see whether it breaks GitHub Actions and roll it back if it does, feel free. AWS SDK client config DOM, where are they now?
Does that have the same build issue?
Oh gosh, that one says it's happy, but you got to update branch. I suspect when you update branch, it
will have the same issue. Yeah.
Oh, the joy. Add support for Postgres locking. We should chase what that is.
Yeah, that's currently on me. So I'm going to do an update to the iDistribute to remove the non-async methods. And I've put a message there to ask him if he'd like me to update his branch at the same time to get it in.
Yeah, that'd be handy as well, because when I get the sweeper bit of the sample added, I'll do a similar thing, which is you can choose the lock mechanism you want to use when you run it, so that you can test everything together. All right. Aspire Playground. Toby, what's happening on Aspire Playground?
Not much. I have to update all the incredible amount of changes everyone's done.
Yeah.
And then I'll go back to it. I think after you put your stuff in with the changes to the samples, that'll be a good time to go then plug in.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah,
I think so too. I think that will help us see what is aspirable in Zillion, because it's stuff that effectively you can pull out from our setup inside the program CS file, the startup CS file, and say, actually, I could do that as a separate thing and just get the results of it. So it might be a lot easier to see.
Yeah, so I'll just do it on the main ones. I think I won't do. I'll just do it on the main web API example. I think just to begin with, because that's always a nice one to be able to just do kind of.
Yeah, so I think we only need to aspirify the web API examples, the Dapper Dynamo and EF Core one, and they're just actually slightly useful for slightly different because they'll have slightly different contexts for even Aspire. Schema registry support, parked behind everything else. I do want to get it done, but we'll need to basically figure out the massive kind of merge problem. So what is the schema registry support, just for Dom? I may not know. The idea in here, let's go to would be to have a transform that would support It's in here. Transfer. No, I don't think that's it. I need to find it. But the idea is to basically have so there's a problem we have today with schema registry is twofold. One is we don't really support it anywhere outside using Kafka and kind of certain serializers. And we'd like to actually say, hey, if you want to attribute your message mapper with a schema registry tag, we can take appropriate action, like check on a produce and fail to produce if basically you don't map to the schema, check on a consume, probably warn would be much more likely given we tend to want Postle's law that doesn't conform to schema on a receipt, and be able to effectively probably use the Confluent API because that's also supported by Apiary, I think it is. So you could tag on the message mapper that we support the schema registry, but also be able to, if you need us to, if you've put a system, if you're in Kafka and you want to write your payload with system text JSON, and then we will do the magic 5 bytes for you on the body rather than forcing you to basically use the SerDes library for Confluent, which basically is Newtonsoft JSON, etc. We're trapped, for example, on an old version of NJSON schema because Confluent only supports that old version of NJSON schema in their SerDes library. So I want to basically say you don't have to use that SerDes library. So you can just use system text JSON, and we will handle the rest of the shit for you. We may want to talk about other things about serialization, Dom, at some point, because there's other feedback. I know you've looked at that in quite a lot of depth internally here and problems with various things like Avro. There is also an interesting, some stuff emerging from Clemens Vasters about how to support Avro, particularly Avro and JSON. Registream is also parked as we'll come back to it, transports I'm kind of okay with us. We can drop at any time. Probably most likely what will happen in this Registreams thing is I will simply take the transport code. I will try and add it to a V10 instance at some point and fix all the problems and try and get it running again. I believe it was not super far off, but it got derailed by the things. Generic mapper, Toby, is that still a live set of problems with that? Or I know we're quite keen to have it in V10.
Yeah, we have. I think I was waiting for your big merge a while back of you.
All right. I get the big
changes.
merge in and then we can talk
Yeah.
about generic mappers.
Yep.
So the goal, Dom, would be effectively, right now you have to write explicit message mapper for everything. The goal is to say, we don't need to do that. You can register a default mapper. So the question is a little bit is what does that API look like? We've run out of time in this session, but maybe Toby, you might have a quick version for Dom of what we're thinking.
Yeah, so what we're thinking is there is a base mapper, which is base JSON 1, because kind of everyone uses JSON. And then we are thinking of then overriding that per transport. So each transport has its own default mapper. So it'd be JSON on kind of like RabbitMQ, but if you're using Kafka, it'll be, what do you guys call it? I've gone blank.
Well, it could be Avro. I mean, it could be JSON, it could be Avro.
Yeah, it could be Avro or something like that. So whatever is kind of more native to that system, because I'm sure they all support JSON, but some of them have more native.
Yeah.
things.
Interestingly, Toby, Paul and I stumbled into something that we'd actually fixed, but we'd forgotten, which is that the individual subscriptions have the channel factories, right? And then there's a default channel factory you can set in options.
Yes.
So I guess having a similar model which says on a subscription, oh, here is the message mapper, and you can just point it to being, oh, okay, I just use the default message mapper, the default JSON or default Avro or whatever, effectively, etc. for anything would be one way of doing it. And then you could have an overall default which you could configure at the options level that says, no, just use the option, use the same way we do with the channel factory, just use a JSON one. Say, no, I don't set it per subscription. I'm just going to use JSON. The problem is more the producer, which is the
That's-
do you do?
Yeah,
I
that's
think that's what
the
we
problem.
stumbled on last time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm using Channel Factory for when you're subscribing to messages.
Yeah.
And that's easy. It's a really nice, easy pattern. There's a base one, which if you don't choose one, and then you can, and if you haven't overridden it for a transport, you just get the basic JSON
Yeah.
one. And then you can
Yeah.
override it at a transport level in your Channel Factory. And then, but the problem is now, how do
Oh.
the producer doesn't use Channel Factory at all? So it's kind
Yeah.
of like,
And we could set on the publication.
yeah.
But there's no options producer dot default, and I guess we could add that, right? You could use the same model which says every publication can potentially have a default mapper if you don't explicitly decide to configure a message map of that particular handler.
Yep.
And then I guess we could set an options on the external bus of options dot default message mapper, which says, nah, ignore if there's nothing on the publication, use me to be your basically message mapper. At least it would fit the pattern.
And it makes it highly configurable. People can just change it how they want.
Yeah, you can set it at multiple different levels.
Yep.
All right. We have about 4 minutes for AOB. Anything anyone want to raise? How many people we got on the stream?
I think they've all gone.
I'm not surprised.
That's good to hear.
It's you watching now. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
doing a refactor of the ASB transport at the moment. Just a few things I've wanted to clean forever. I know I've put one into V9, which is a very light touch. The V10, I'm going to have a go at doing it all again. So I'm hoping to have a PR in the next couple of days out for that one.
So in theory, we can edit this video. I think that might be a subsequent experiment. I will share the video when it exists with you folks so you can have a look at it. But I think probably we might want to edit the highlights so that you can do a producer like half-hour version that's faster. But we'll see. All right.
Cool.
Nothing else? We all good? Lovely to
Yeah,
see you
good.
all.
Nice to see you all.
See if we can encourage Johnny to come to one. Maybe now we've
Yeah.
got video, Johnny will come.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need to get him on. I think he's just.
Yeah, persuade him it's his chance of fame and glory.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Lovely to chat to you all. I will see you all soon.
See you all soon.